Welcome to another episode of One of Us Knows What They're Talking About, and the other one is you. I'm Lori Burch, your host. Join us as we discuss and unpack wills, trusts, estate planning, and probate law in a way that's actually informative, interesting, and, well, hopefully entertaining. Because if you don't have a will, the state of Texas has one for you. Let's dive in. So our topic today is a really good one. And I was impressed because Sarah's like, hey, let's talk about things people forget to put in their trust and what happens. And I'm like, wow, Sarah. And she said, well, that was actually a suggestion you had made. Oh, well, now it's an even better idea. But this is true. This is a real problem that people don't put things in their trust. And that's, well, just like not having a trust at all. So by way of background, I've gone ahead of ourselves. What is a trust? So there's this thing, there's hundreds of types of trusts, probably literally, and they boil down to two main types. There's what's called a living trust, which exists while you're alive, you set it up. And then the other kind is called a testamentary trust, which is a trust that would get set up upon your death. And then among those two main types of trusts, there are also millions of different types of trusts. But when we're talking about the idea of if you pass away, how do you want to make sure the things that you have go to the people you want and that the people that you want are in control of making that happen, paying off debts, getting into accounts, settling things, selling, transferring, doing all of that? You may be familiar with this concept, often called an executor in a will. And so when they come to us and are like, well, I want to get this done, then there are lots of different options, but two big kind of planning options are doing a will route or doing a revocable living trust route. So that sounds super fancy and cumbersome. I could be fancier because I could call it by its like real name, and that's an inter vivos trust. Sarah, what is an inter vivos trust?
I don't know.
You're already overthinking it. I literally just answered this. I just said it. What is an inter vivos trust?
What do we do?
I just said it.
I know, and now I forgot.
What do we do?
Because you weren't listening?
It escaped. Like, what do? We do trusts.
What kind of trust?
We do living trusts.
There you go.
Okay. Inter vivos means living trust. Okay.
Living trust.
Well, okay.
We're off to a great start.
Great start. Yeah. So anyway, and a lot of people have the misperception that this is something that you need to be wealthy or have a lot of assets, and it really has nothing to do with that. There are trusts that you set up to help offset estate tax and other things, but that's not really the primary driver in deciding whether you want to have a revocable living trust. The revocable word's important because that means that it's something you can update, change, control, just the way you can your assets when they are not connected to a trust, which is the heart of the matter of what we're going to discuss today. But what people don't often realize is that a will still has to go through a probate court process, which means there's some delay and there's some expense. A judge has to say that it's a valid will. A judge has to decide that the executor you named is able to serve in that capacity. And then there are certain filings that you have to do, reporting to the court as far as assets and notifying beneficiaries and all of that. Now, a will is still far and above better than anything else because that process I just explained, multiply it by 10 as far as costs and time delay and paperwork when you don't. But the most important thing is a will, you still get to spell out all your wishes. Who gets what, who does what, how, who takes care of your kids, who gets your house, what age or ages do you think your kids can handle things, or who do you want your, collections of things to go to, that sort of thing. So it's important, but it still has to go through probate. So there's still a time and expense, and it's a public record. So for people who want to go a step further and make this a more seamless, efficient, private, and less expensive process, then they can choose to do what's called a revocable living trust. And it basically is the same thing as a will in the sense that it says, this is what I have, this is how it's distributed, and this is who's in charge of doing that. But when you do the trust, then if your assets are connected to it, which is, again, the heart of the conversation today, which we're about to get to, but it's important to have this foundation because not even our marketing coordinator has the foundation. So, is if everything's connected to the trust, then when you pass away, there's no need to go through that probate court process. So your trustee, not called executor in this case, called trustee because it's a trust, is able to step right in. They don't have to go to court. A court doesn't have to approve it. Court doesn't have to appoint them. They automatically are able to serve just by virtue of being the next in line and you're dead. Also, it's a private matter because there's no public record of it, no filing, so all of that. So a lot of upsides to the trust. Sometimes when we go through it, especially with how cumbersome and expensive and time-consuming probate has become in Texas over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, people will ask us, well, what's the downside? Why doesn't everybody do a trust? And frankly, in most cases, there is no downside, and we don't know why not everybody does a trust. There are some very rare examples of where maybe a trust is kind of overboard, but that's something that you should be deciding with a qualified estate planning firm. Whether that's the case, it should not be something you should decide on your own because we're the ones who know of all these things that can pop up that you could possibly never imagine. But for the most part, it is a good thing to do. However, a little funny thing about the trusts is that if you don't connect your assets to it, then when you die, those assets will have to go through probate because there will have to be a will with your trust that will distribute it through it. But the goal with the trust is that you have to connect assets to it. Now, that's how we normally refer to it, but the technical phrasing of this is funding your trust. And when you hear that, you may understand why I have chosen to say connecting things to your trust, because what does funding your trust really sound like? I mean, that's not an actual question. So Sarah, please don't even try.
Thank you.
I'm real excited over there.
Yeah. What does it mean? And so I like the expression connecting it to the trust because that is an essential piece. And it is the biggest mistake. It's the number one mistake that people make when they do living trusts. It's also one of the biggest reasons that you should not do this DIY stuff or go to the cheapest law firm that you can find, is because what will happen is you will sacrifice the guidance and assistance with doing that piece by doing that. And if you don't do that piece, then it's like, it wasn't even worth doing it in the first place. Like, why even have it? Which Sam and Sarah have something special for us about things that, what happens when you don't add things and then they're not as good or they're pointless. And so they're going to do something which it's a really great topic and a really great idea. And I just hope you don't blow it because you've been served up a topic that is a gold mine of ideas. But anyway, when it comes to the trust, it really depends on the assets that you have, how you connect it. So every asset can conceivably be connected differently to your trust. And this is another big thing. It needs to be customized to you and your wishes. It's not a blanket, well, everybody who has a trust should do bank accounts this way, or everybody who has a trust should do a home this way. So we're going to talk about generalities. So one of the biggest things that don't get properly connected to a trust is real property. Now, some people are thrown off by the expression real property. I don't know why, but I've been doing this too long. So real property, I'm not going to ask you, Sarah. I know when I'm beat. Real property is really like land, real estate, your home, mineral interests, since we're in Texas, and that seems to be something lots of people have. So yeah, real estate, real property. And so those are all things that have a deed associated with it. And so in order to have the title connected to your trust, there are different considerations with real property. So anybody not named Sarah care to offer ideas of how real property could be connected to your trust?
Transfer on death deed.
A transfer on death deed. Sam, what is it? Actually, no. Sarah, let's redeem yourself. What is a transfer on death deed? This is perfect for you, the way you like to define things.
It is a deed that transfers upon your death.
Amen, sister. That is right.
Ooh.
That is right. So a transfer on death deed is something that is somewhat newer to Texas, and it doesn't exist in every state. So it's not a one size fits all, but there are some upsides to particularly doing your home as a transfer on death deed to a trust. Now, there may be reasons you want to just do a deed where it shows the name of your home in the trust, but there are a couple of reasons why a transfer on death deed may be preferable. Sam or Cynthia care to offer some ideas as to, or examples as to why a transfer on death deed would be a beneficial way to transfer your home to a trust?
Yes. So let's say, for example, you go ahead and do it while you're living. Well, what if your homestead exemption gets a little messed up because the county doesn't understand what
Yeah.
you're doing? There's a
Yeah.
lot of things where it is not lost on us, the nuance and complexities of things. Like we're saying, oh, yeah, probate, all these things. Oh, just put in your trust. But it has to be done right. If you just go to the courthouse or wherever, and you're like, hi, I'm going to put this in the name of my trust, it can be seen as transferring ownership, even though it's still you. So you need to make sure that you're careful there. You can get rid of your homestead exemptions. We've seen the county accidentally, or on purpose, I guess, because they didn't read things, remove exemptions for over 65.
Yeah.
Or we've had people that have like certain disability exemptions that have been removed simply because the counties haven't been looking at the documents, and it's been becoming a more and more prevalent thing to where that's why we've switched over to predominantly doing transfer on death deeds, just because we want to make sure that you're protected as much as possible and have less headaches to deal with.
Yeah, that really is the primary roadblock that we've discovered. And it really has only been in the last few years that this has been more of an issue where counties will remove your homestead exemption. You have to reapply. So I would say it's not a huge deal in the sense that you're going to get denied your homestead exemption. Now, but key about that, it's very important that the trust has the language in it that preserves your homestead exemption, and that the deed has the language to preserve your homestead exemption. That's actually one of the mistakes we saw with one of our DIY jobs that somebody did, is where they successfully got their deed recorded, but it didn't have that language. And why would they know that it needs that language? And what even is that language? It's not nearly as simple or as easy as this preserves my homestead exemption. No, it doesn't even say anything like that at all, the clause that needs to be in there. So, somebody lost their homestead exemption by doing this. But it's more hassle, it's more work. So it's worth it if it's important for your home to still show up in the name of your trust, but that is a consideration. And we actually had someone towards the end of the year who wanted to do the general warranty deed, and the county removed the homestead exemption and said, no problem, just reapply for it. In the meantime, go ahead and pay your property tax in January without it, which was about $12,000. Just go ahead and pay that. And then in a few months, once we get to your file and add your homestead exemption back on, then we'll send you a credit for the overage, which is like $5,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, no, no, no. And then now sometimes they're also asking for copies of the trust or certification of the trust. And those are things that typically we haven't seen. So, and we're talking specifically about the homestead. So for other property that's not your homestead with the exemption, then maybe it's not as big of a deal to just do a general warranty deed. But the point being is that something has to be done. You can't just, I've seen these trusts, and again, it's always these DIY jobs or will kits or something where at the end it has like a schedule that says, or an exhibit that says, all this whole list is now in my trust. And it'll have your home and your bank account and your car. And that does not work. It has to be done while you're alive. The only thing that sort of thing works with is personal property. And so we always do like an assignment of personal property. I intend for all my personal assets to be controlled by my trust, because you can't retitle your furniture or your jewelry or your stamp collection or that sort of thing. But when it comes to other types of assets, so real estate is a big deal. And the other reasons why sometimes a transfer and death deed might be better is your homeowner's insurance. If you do the transfer and death deed, it's still in your name during your life. And so you won't have to notify your homeowner's insurance. But if you put it into the name of your trust, you should let them know so that you don't have any problems with a claim. Again, there's not going to be an issue. They're not going to change your rating or anything like that, but it's just another step. It's just something that maybe that's not important to do. Another thing that we see is when someone's going to refinance their home or they're going to get a home equity loan. To me, this is just title companies being lazy. Frankly, there's no legal reason this happens, but it does happen every time. They want you to take the home out of the trust. And then once you close on your refi or your loan, then you can retitle it back in the trust. Again, easy peasy to do that, but why go through that hassle if you don't have to? And there's other things, but this isn't all about real estate and trusts and the ways to do deeds. But that's something that gets missed a lot. And if you don't get the home in the trust, then you're going to have to go to probate. And just on behalf of personal experience, I'd like to tell everybody out there who either comes to Burch Law or goes to another qualified law firm to do this, it's a really good idea if you're doing a trust if you let them know all the real estate that you own.
Yes.
Because firms like ours will do all the deed work and get it recorded and make sure there's no problems. And far too often, something happens, like, oh yeah, there was that other piece of property we had. Well, guess what? You're going to probate now. The other type of thing that doesn't always get done is we do recommend typically, but again, this can be specific to your circumstances and goals. But when it comes to things that have beneficiary designations, life insurance, retirement, investment accounts, those aren't typically things that you can or want to change the ownership name to your trust, but you do want to update beneficiaries more than likely. Again, there are exceptions. So, what if you want everything to go to your spouse? That's what your trust says, but you're really wanting to make a cash distribution to your nephew because they're so important to you and all of that. Well, maybe a beneficiary designation is a way to do that. Maybe on your life insurance, you do 20% to nephew and then 80% to your trust. So again, that's an example of where this is specific and customized to your wishes. But in general, we like to do the beneficiary to the trust for anything that you want to be distributed that way, because it'll avoid probate, which it does anyway if you put a named person. But the benefits of doing the trust is, one, if your beneficiary is a minor child, just naming them is going to cause a lot of issues because your trust is what's going to say, okay, this is who will oversee it for them, and at age 25 they can have it. Well, if you don't connect it to the trust with the beneficiary and you just put, the 5-year-old's name on there, then the life insurance company is going to say, well, doesn't matter that there's this trust. You said this direct person, they're underage, so you can either go to the court and get somebody appointed to oversee it for them. Money can go into the court registry, and at age 18, we're going to give it to them. Or one of my favorite things that life insurance companies will do is they'll say, or we'll just hang on to the money for now until they do turn 18, and then they can have it. So by connecting it to the trust, then it can go, if there's a 5-year-old that you want to be a beneficiary, then your trust is going to have all the parameters on how to handle that. And the other thing that a trust does that just naming a beneficiary doesn't do is it has contingencies. So what if you put person A as your beneficiary, but person A doesn't survive you? Are you going to remember to update your beneficiary? I don't know. I can tell you my experience. Not often. What if you divorce person A? Are you going to remember to update your beneficiary? I don't have to tell you. In my experience, not often. But if you have your trust as the beneficiary, then your trust will have, well, if not person A, then this, if not that, then that. So beneficiaries are typically the way to handle connecting those type of assets to the trust. And then there's things like HSA accounts, health savings accounts, where you can put PODs, pay on death. I know Cynthia's probably going to have to pull a fast one on me and want to talk about e-bonds and other types of assets that I hate. I'll let you do that, but I have to talk about the most important one first. Well, and then cars. Cars are kind of a tricky thing because it is kind of a pain to go and retitle the name of your car in the trust. So what we typically do is advise people, hey, let's do this assignment, kind of like that personal property. It's not the most ideal thing, but there's other forms you can do at the DMV here in Texas where it's like a beneficiary designation. But unless it's like an antique or a classic car, and there is a difference, and this is my heritage, everybody, there is a difference between classic and antique cars. But something you're going to hang on to that actually has a great value, that is worth getting retitled in the name of the trust, typically. Okay. But for other cars that you're probably going to trade in, then what you can do is just wait until you're going to buy a new car and buy it in the name of the trust, if you so choose. But make sure you're talking to your estate planning firm about the best way to do that, because there's a lot of buts, exceptions, that sort of thing when it comes to vehicles. But let's talk about bank accounts or any accounts that are liquid accounts. Ooh, Sarah, what's a liquid account?
Oh, God.
Oh. What do you think it is?
A liquid account. It seems like something that's like more fluid and you can take money in and out as you please. No penalties. I don't know. That's what it sounds
account
like.
Is more fluid. That's gonna put on a pillow.
Yeah.
I dare say I think that's an excellent definition, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yay.
Where you can take money in and out without any penalties. That's pretty damn good. So this would be accounts that you would have, like where you would get money to pay for things, right? And so checking, savings, sometimes brokerage accounts, those accounts, rather than doing a beneficiary or a POD, pay on death, or a TOD, transfer on death, even though all of that would accomplish avoiding probate and being distributed according to the trust. And this may be the biggest headache initially in setting up a trust, although I can tell you, Capital One, not a sponsor, is one of the easiest banks to change over to a revocable living trust, to have it retitled as a revocable living trust, because they have an internet form that you download, you fill out, you sign it with a notary, and you send it back to them. And within a few weeks, boom, suddenly your accounts are in the name of the trust. I absolutely, in 20 years of doing this, do not know of another bank that does it so seamlessly. Truly.
And guys, we're not nice to banks typically.
Yeah.
No.
No, and there's plenty of things I could say about Capital One that's not so favorable, like about how all the Burch Law money disappeared for like 4 days earlier this year.
Was that this year?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
January.
Dang.
This was some
It's a
third-party
long-
vendor issue.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so all the money was there, but you just couldn't
Visible
see
to
it.
us.
Which, that's just kind of as an aside, the funny thing about money in a bank is that you think it's real, but it's not real.
Like, it's
And
there, wink, wink.
when you lose access to being able to see it, it's this realization that, does it even exist? I can kind of understand these people that stockpile cash but now you're getting to where you can't even use cash in some places, and Burch Law is one of them.
Yeah, we are one of those places.
I mean, we say that, and yet, Sam, what do we do?
Yeah, my bad.
Okay. It's
Well,
fine.
Now I know.
Explain why, though.
Well, back to Capital One. They don't. I think the reason why they make it so easy to transfer retitle accounts into a trust account is because there's basically no branches open anymore.
Yeah.
So how else are they going to do it and still have customers? That's the same thing that makes depositing cash very difficult. And so there are 2 branches that are still somewhat nearby, and I will begrudgingly say yes if my back's against the wall about accepting cash. But once those branches close, the answer is going to be no. Like, we just can't do it.
Try
We
again.
just can't do
Crystal has gone dark.
it. The crystal, yes, yeah. So, but the problem with getting things transferred getting bank accounts transferred into the name of the trust, even though that has so many great benefits, and we recommend absolutely that you do it and you go through whatever hoops, it has nothing to do with the legality of it. It's just the confusion of the people that at the bank that are supposed to be the ones doing it. Because you have to understand, what do we say? 70+% of people have no plan, nothing. So of that 30%, a very small percentage of them have trusts, and then an even smaller percentage of them actually do the work of trying to get things connected to their trust. So when you're talking about bankers, how often do you think they really encounter something that is so basic and common and easy, but it seems really strange to them? And that's the problem. So we do a lot of assistance and guidance with clients. The good news is it's a one and done. Because once you have a trust, if you walk into a bank and say, I need to open up an account in the name of this living trust, it's going to be easy peasy, like no problem. So it's just the initial taking your accounts and getting them transferred to. But the benefits of doing that in lieu of just something that is super easy with pretty much every bank, of a POD, a pay on death, is that like the transfer and death deed, it still stays in your name. But what happens with the liquid account, Sarah, is that they'll quite often, when they find out that that person's passed, they'll freeze them. So if they have the mortgage payment or the utility payments or streaming services that are coming out of that, then that can cause some disruption. Whereas if it's still in this trust and now we just have a new trustee that's managing it, then it's a more seamless process to be able to keep things paid. The other part of it is with a living trust, there's a benefit to it even while you're alive. If you become disabled, Alzheimer's, dementia, something like that, the trust allows for your next in line, your successor trustee, to step in and handle things for you. Well, they're not going to be able to handle things that aren't in the name of the trust. And what would be the most critical things for somebody like that to handle? It'd be the money to help pay for things, essentially. So, good idea a lot of the time. We do have instances where, let's say it's a married couple and they keep separate accounts. Well, unless they want to really start treating those separate accounts as joint accounts, probably don't want to move it into the name of their joint trust, because now you're going to have something that functions more like a joint account. So what we usually tell them is, do the POD thing, do the pay on death, so it avoids probate and goes through the trust, but go ahead and open a joint account and keep maybe a month or 2 of living expenses in there. So that's the one that can stay active if something happens to both of you. So anyway, those are the biggest things that are really important to make sure that get connected to your trust. And if you don't, like, here's the bottom line. If you don't do that, then you're going to go through probate, which is why you have a will still with a trust, but it's a will that we hope never gets used. But you're going to go through probate, which is the number one reason people get this revocable living trust. Now, there are many, many other types of assets we can talk about when people have businesses, and depending on what the type of businesses are, stocks, e-bonds, all of that. Now, I will say a quick thing about stocks. If you own stock and it's wrapped up in a portfolio, then that's going to fall in line typically with what we were talking about. It's usually a brokerage company or your financial advisor that you add a beneficiary to. But if you own standalone stock, you typically can do a transfer on death a transfer on death on that. But you have to find out through these companies. And then I will say one last type of asset, just because it's near and dear to my heart and it's so unique, is timeshares. It's real estate, but not real estate. So it really depends on the timeshare, on the company that you have it through, what you can do. And so usually it's going to cost some extra money, but it might be worth it so that they don't have to go through all the extra expense in doing that when you're dead, because it's like having to go through probate in a separate state. So a lot of these companies are in Florida, for example. So then you're making it to where they have to go through a probate process in Florida unless you try and get this wrapped up. But timeshares really, really depend on the timeshare company itself and how that's managed. So if you're ever sitting in one of these timeshare presentations and they get you, you might want to ask, what happens if I pass away? Will this go through my will? What if I have a trust? What if I get a trust? What does that look like? Because if you don't get things connected to your trust, you're going to meet the fine probate court system that we have. And it's fun. So good topic. Took mostly me to get through it. But
I think it's just one of those things.
This is nice.
You start and you go. And we're just like, yeah, that sounds great.
Well, I always try to think, what could my colleagues here contribute to? And this one didn't feel like there was a lot of contribution that could be made on this topic, but still a good topic. Still, it's a very important one. Like, it's one of the most common issues that we see. It really is.
The only thing I could think of is because I go through the memo checklist after or like during signings.
What is that, Sam?
Oh yeah, so our memo checklist is, it's just essentially everything that Lori just mentioned. How to connect your trust and everything.
You go through that at the signing?
Well, I just tell them to look through it, kind of like mark the ones that are
nice.
and let us know if we have questions. Because it's me saying, oh, okay, real estate, we're going to be doing this for you, but please look at everything else. It's their reading material as I go and scan their document.
You mean whenever they're supposed to be leaving us a review, a 5-star glowing review?
They do both. But I say usually with bank accounts to essentially try to skip the teller and just go to like straight to a branch manager, because we've learned just like half the time the tellers don't know what a trust is, which just makes it. That was the only other comment I had for it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Like, the biggest thing I touched on in a little bit is that while Lori was talking about the probate steps and how it can take a long time, I was sitting here like, man, that does sound like a lot. But I've done it so many times for our clients. It's one of those things, like, it's not lost on us how much nuance there is to things. And we do try to prepare everybody that comes through Burch Law for, like, hey, these are the steps you're going to have to take. There's a lot of stuff that we cannot do for you because the bank is not going to allow us to go in your place and retitle your bank accounts. They're not going to allow us to do so many of those like little things that just require you. But we do try our best to make sure that you are aware of what you have to do. And that's why we ask questions. None of it is just because we want to know. It's no, we need to know how to best help.
Yeah, because if we could, we would. I really would.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it
would
would be so much
cost
easier.
because we'd have to do that. But seriously, if we could just go to your bank and do all of this for you, there'd have to be a cost associated with it. But I would do it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't do it. I'd have Sam do it.
We would somebody else do
No,
it.
we would provide
Yeah.
that service in a heartbeat because that's how important it is, and that's how big of a mistake we see people make.
Yeah, it would be so much easier to go for us to gain the contacts at the different banks. So let's say we have a client that goes to Wells Fargo. We're like, okay, great. We have a contact there. If you go to Capital One, okay, great. We have a contact there. It would be so much easier, but that's not stuff we can do for you.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of things that don't work as well or at all
Scared.
when something isn't added to them, are you sure you shouldn't have run these by us?
Listen,
Now I'm
Sarah,
personally nervous.
Personally, is there any other?
is there any
Ty?
other kind?
Well, she might be
Well, I don't wanna
nervous on
speak for
behalf of
Sam.
you, Sam.
I mean, we have the same brain cell. If you're nervous, usually I'm nervous. So
Well, why don't the two of you tell us what thoughts you have to contribute?
yeah,
Just go through it
So-
and then we'll see.
yeah. Now these sound. I mean, they are dumb. They're dumb, but now they feel dumber. So the first one is things that can't work without other things. You can't have a car without an engine.
That's
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
that's true.
True.
Unless it's like a Fred Flintstone car.
Yeah.
Got me
Right.
there. Got me there.
Like a
A
pedal
little
kind.
Fisher Price. Another thing you can't have is toast without bread. You need bread. That's pretty important.
Okay.
All right, Sarah.
Yep.
This one is more symbolic.
Master's degree at work there.
Well, I came up with that one.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
Sam.
I also came up with this one. I joked about this one, but Sarah laughed, so we kept it. You can't have freedom without the eagle.
I really envision an eagle sound playing over that.
Yeah. Yeah, you should
Are you
add
going
one.
to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the one who
Okay.
edits this, I hope.
All right.
That's-
You can't have Christmas without Christ. It's just mass.
Okay.
You go, Sam.
I'm wondering if we're going to like how many. I think our audience should mostly be fine, but how many letters we would get if not,
Yeah.
a lot of letters.
And on that vein, you can't have Easter without the Easter bunny.
Oh, okay.
Wow. I mean, you started off okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were a little
Hopefully-
rushed.
Hopefully we finish strong.
Yeah.
You can't have Burch Law without Lori Burch. So that's all we have.
I mean, it would
That's
literally
all?
stop working.
Excuse you. Wow. Okay.
Well, I
She's
mean,
the one
it-
who runs
it
payroll, who pays the bill.
Well, there's something much more fundamental at play here.
Yeah, there's
She's also the main attorney.
No, even more
Oh.
fundamental to that. Who would own Burch Law if something happened
That
to
too.
me?
That's the main
Yeah.
part. Yeah, that's
That's why you
the
can't
bit.
have Burch Law without Lori Burch.
Ta-da!
How about you can't have Lori without the E?
That too.
That too.
I guess I was thinking more like ingredients.
Yeah.
We
I
did have
was-
one on there where I said you can't have cake without eggs, but you technically can. It's just kind of more dense.
Well,
Or something that's not the same
yeah.
if you take an ingredient out. Like if you take gluten out of
Cake.
bread.
Yeah,
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
not
yeah.
the
I
same.
get.
not the same.
I don't think either of us bake or cook enough to
Yeah, no.
be smart enough for that one. I gotta be honest. You can't have chicken pot pie without the chicken.
Then it's just a vegetable pie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
Like
go.
if you don't put the chicken in the chicken pot pie, then it's not chicken pot pie.
Yeah.
Which if you don't put the assets into the trust, then the trust is not going to work.
Yeah.
It's just a
Exactly.
shell of a thing. Great.
Right.
That
If you
was
turn your oven
wonderful.
on, but you don't put the food in,
You're trying to
then
save,
you're not going to cook a meal.
save it.
All my examples feel food related.
Yeah,
when I think through them.
Yeah, I think that was also our problem. We were doing a lot of food ones, and then so we were trying to come out with non-food ones.
What food ones did y'all do?
Toast, the eggs. I feel like there was another one.
The eggs.
And you went with
Egg
toast.
without eggs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Sarah laughed when I said it.
Sorry.
I mean, you can't have toast without bread. It's not toast.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering, like, I feel like there's, you know what? Great job.
We had
Great
limited time
job.
today.
I think.
I came out an hour and a half meeting into this for wanting to bring.
Was it a signing because you went through the whole memorandum?
No, it was the James call.
Oh.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out.
No,
Not a
sponsored.
sponsor.
for real.
Oh,
Not as, oh.
We
eh.
pay them.
yeah. We sponsor.
You're a vendor.
That's true. That's true. Just to wrap up. So I feel like we've talked about this, but in the idea of whether you should add something or not add something, where are each of you on the whole beans and chili?
Big fan.
Like, is it chili if it doesn't have beans?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
why it's chili with beans. Everybody emphasizes, oh,
Nobody
it's chili
says
with
that.
beans.
That's what Pete Dowkus said yesterday. Fun fact.
That's what it says on the can if you go to the grocery store, but I also
Yeah.
don't. Okay, Luke likes to buy chili. I like to make
I just
chili.
don't like chili.
I don't like chili.
No. But Pete Dowkus, our local weatherman, he was posting about the storm last week, or was it yesterday? Sometime in the last week. And then he just posted his chili recipe, and somebody said it's not chili if it doesn't have beans. And he goes, if I wanted it with beans, I'd call it chili with beans.
I mean, yeah.
Shout out to Pete.
Wow.
That's it.
Okay.
Also, hold on. I know that Sam just said he's our local weatherman. The amount of times that Sam just sends like tweets, it's like, oh, Pete said this. I'm like, who the heck is Pete? And then I have to open my phone and like, oh, your weather guy.
Yeah.
There's so many times I've been so confused why
the
you're
only
messaging
Pete
me
I
about
know.
Pete.
He doesn't know me, but I know him.
That's fair. But still, just
Yeah.
the way that you casually throw him around a
Yeah,
conversation,
he's my guy.
it's just one of those like, should I know this person?
Him and the people at the next weather service of Fort Worth, my best friends. They just don't know it.
Well, I think you could have done better, you two, with this
Yeah.
topic, but
I agree.
that's okay. If any of our fans have ideas of things that when they don't get added to something, then the something isn't as good or won't work, then please let us know.
Please.
Thank you.
Wait, are we not going to talk about the pineapple on pizza?
No, we're done.
Well played.
Thanks for listening. And just to cover all our bases about what you just heard, I'm sorry and you're welcome. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And tell your friends about us. We do webinars and live events. The best way to stay up to date is to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Links are in the show notes. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, maybe you have a question you'd like us to answer, or maybe you just want to say hi, hit the link in the show notes or go to burch-law.com/podcast and fill out the contact form.
Much better.
Yeah, I thought that had a lot of energy.